It now looks like Newcastle United are finally in the final stages of recruiting their next director of football. Of course, Dan Ashworth on garden leave since all the Man United links, but we'll come on to that very shortly. Craig Hope has announced that it looks like we're down to 3 for the job of the director of football at Newcastle United to replace Ashworth. And those 3 are Paul Mitchell, Rui Pedro Braz, and Tiago Pinto. Now, we've done various shows in the past looking at the prospective sporting directors, of course. We've looked at Paul Mitchell, who still by a long stretch of the imagination is my favourite, by a long shot. I'm not sure about Tiago Pinto. I'm not sure what he could bring. He certainly doesn't have the CV of a Paul Mitchell. And as for Braz himself, I'm not sure. We haven't covered him on a show yet. His name has come from nowhere, to be honest. But incidentally, there's no Paolo Maldini mentioned there. Now, I'm not saying that Craig Hope has got this final 3 right or wrong. He's just mentioning that the leading candidates are these 3. It doesn't say that Paolo Maldini has not had an interview or is not going to be interviewed. But I think if they're in the final stages of the recruitment process now of the sporting director, I would 95% say that those 3 are now the front runners. Now, for me, as I've said, Paul Mitchell is by far and away the best candidate, in my opinion, for the job. And certainly when we did the show on him, looking at what he'd done in the past, his CV, etc., he looks like the man to do the job. Come in, and I think he's better than Ashworth. Judging by his CV, I think he could do a much better job than Ashworth. Ashworth, for me, hasn't completed what he came here to do. He's jumped ship. As soon as Man United come knocking, he disappears. And he doesn't follow through with what the plans were when he first came to the football club. Of course, we had to wait while he was on garden leave at Brighton and then bring him in. And then he's here for a year and a bit, a year and a half, and then he buggers off. I don't really agree with what Ashworth's done, but he's history now as far as I'm concerned. He's on garden leave. That's up to Man United and Newcastle to come to some agreement with him. We have to look forward now, and that forwards is with these prospective directors of football. And as I say, Paul Mitchell for me is by far and away the number 1 candidate. It's interesting because I want to hear from you guys about what you think. Who would you pick for the director of football? Have you seen our shows? If you haven't, look back on them, the director of football shows. Well, I think we've done 3 so far. Probably not going to do another one now, especially with the leading candidates here. But Paul Mitchell was the first one we ever did, and a lot of people that were watching that show were saying, yes, let's go and get Mitchell. He's the best one for the job, and he's probably even better than Dan Ashworth. He's got a brilliant CV. He knows football inside out, and he can be a real plus point for Newcastle United and a plus point for the club itself to bring in much better signings in the summer, provided, of course, we've got money to spend. But let me know in the comments, are you shocked that Paolo Maldini isn't in the top 3, or do you think Newcastle have even spoken to him yet? Are they waiting to speak to him, or do you think that this is the final 3 according to Craig Hope? Let's see what happens. But let me know in the comments. Now, speaking of the director of football problems, you may have seen that Sir Jim Radcliffe was interviewed yesterday by Gabby Logan at the London Marathon. And still, this bloke whinges on about how difficult it's been since he's taken over the job role at Manchester United. Ineos have struggled because there's so many staff on garden leave. Now, I can't see that being the case, that every single member of staff he's looking for to bring into Manchester United is on garden leave. I think this was a total dig, a complete dig at Newcastle United and the way they've handled the Dan Ashworth situation. For me, they've handled it perfectly. And for once, they're demonstrating that Manchester United can't walk over everybody and just sign who they want when they want. They're not that kind of club anymore. There is other clubs now who are around who are going to fight Manchester United left, right and centre for various different things, whether it be signings or backroom staff or managers. They're not what they were, and they don't have the pulling power that they used to have. And Newcastle United are firmly in their rights to keep a grasp on this compensation and not be pushed around by Manchester United or Sir Jim Radcliffe. Radcliffe's saying that it's a long journey to sign staff. You want real capable people, but they're on garden leave. Now, he's talking in general. He's talking about general staff trying to get them in on garden leave. That's bollocks. We know that's bollocks. We know that's a dig at Newcastle United because obviously they desperately want Dan Ashworth in, and Newcastle United have refused to be pushed around. They've named their compensation, and still Manchester United refuse to pay it. As far as I'm concerned, if you want Dan Ashworth, Manchester United, Jim Radcliffe, pay the sodden money. Stop whinging to media outlets and TV about how hard done by you are and pay the money. The reason I don't think you're paying the money, Mr. Radcliffe, is because I don't think you've got it, quite honestly. And I don't know whether that worries Manchester United fans or not. Quite frankly, I couldn't give a chuff about them. However, from a Newcastle point of view, they are well within the rights to stick by what they think that compensation deal is worth. If Dan Ashworth is this glory, director of football that can do magical things, we didn't see it in Newcastle. He didn't have time to, he certainly didn't give himself time before he jumped ship to see the project through. So for me, put your money where your mouth is, Radcliffe, and, pay the compensation. I think Newcastle United have come down a little bit on the compensation and trying to come to some agreement with you, but I don't think you've got the money. And it's very interesting now to see that, Manchester United not being linked with these massive signings in the summer like they were before Radcliffe and Ineos took them over. All of a sudden, the money's not there. So for me, I just think that he's crying and he's whinging and consistently whinging on for this deal to happen instead of just putting up the money. But the money for me, I don't think is there, which is why he's crying on for Newcastle to drop that compensation fee a little bit further. But we won't, because we will not be pushed around. And certainly Amanda, who by all accounts is in contact with Jim Radcliffe regarding this deal, she will not be pushed around very easily. And so Jim Radcliffe has met his match well and truly with Amanda Staveley. We all know that Newcastle United are desperately going to need a centre-half in the summer with injuries to Botman and Lascelles, of course. Lascelles recently signing a contract extension for a year, so he's still going to be around. But we're looking at Christmas, guys, for both of these players to be back. And whether they're back fully fit by Christmas is a big question. Is a huge question. We know what these injuries can do to people. Let's just hope that they do make full recoveries and get back as soon as possible. What we don't want to do is rush them back. So Newcastle United are apparently looking at Juventus defender Dean Huijsen. He's 19 years old, and Jose Mourinho has come out and said that he is the best prospect in the whole of Europe right now. Now, that's high praise indeed. Whatever you think of Jose Mourinho, he knows his defenders, doesn't he? The way he plays the game, the way he sends his teams out. Very, very defensive manager. He knows his defenders. And for him to come out and say that he's one of the biggest young prospects across Europe, quite frankly, let's go and get him. The problem is, you think of young defenders, don't you? And you think, wow, they're going to cost an absolute arm and a leg. However, what I'm seeing here is a big difference between English centre-backs that are being quoted and European centre-backs. Now, Huijsen is, he's valued at 25 million quid. Now, you can take that with probably a little bit higher, maybe go to 30, 35 million. That's not a lot for a guy that's one of the best prospects across Europe. Now, Liverpool are also interested in him because they will need another centre-back. But I find it a little bit puzzling that Liverpool are linked to players considering they don't know who the manager is going to be next season. I'm hearing this morning that they've made contact with Thomas Tuchel. Who knows? I mean, it would seem like a good transition, wouldn't it? Jurgen Klopp, Thomas Tuchel, take over, also German. He could maybe help with the transition. However, that's nothing to do with us. Liverpool will probably look for a centre-back to play alongside Van Dijk next season. It's been highly rumoured that they're looking across various different leagues across Europe. But we have been in contact with Juventus. We've inquired. That's about as far as it goes. There's no bids or anything like that gone in yet. But this is a very interesting player for me because it's a player who's been a little bit off the radar, if you like. We've never spoke about him on transfer shows or anything like that. So I'm really interested to see where this goes because whatever you think, as I say, of Jose Mourinho, he knows his defenders, and Huijsen could be a very, very good signing for Newcastle. And let's not forget, he's 19. So moving forward, when Shah does eventually step aside, Lascelles, of course, we've got Botman and Hewson there, two very young defenders who can be the real rock at the back for Newcastle United for years to come. So it may not be a bad purchase. We know that Newcastle will probably be looking to bring in some free transfers. You've got Lloyd Kelly hopefully coming in from Bournemouth. He can play left back or centre back, so there's a little bit of variation there. But Hewson himself and Sven Botman, they can be the two centre backs for years to come for Newcastle United if we can bring him in. It's very, very exciting. And the fact that Newcastle United will probably make a couple of decent money signings in the summer and bring the rest made up of probably frees and loans and things like that, depending on what the FFP situation is. So Hewson for me is definitely a player that I would love to see in the black and white in Newcastle. And finally, we know that Newcastle will probably be looking for a goalkeeper in the summer, given what's happened to Nick Pope. He's probably, this injury, I'm still not sure about. It's the second time it's happened to him, so we have to see how he goes. Dubravka came out in the news last week and said that he wasn't happy at Newcastle United. He's not happy with what's going on behind the scenes, I think, with his future playing time. He will look elsewhere in the summer. Karius himself obviously will be off. He's looking to go back over into mainland Europe next season. So it leaves a space for a goalkeeper, doesn't it? I'm not even going to discuss Mark Gillespie because I don't know what his role at Newcastle is. To be quite honest, it's bizarre. However, Aaron Ramsdale has been on Newcastle's wish list for quite some time now. He's been mentioned in several months now about a possible transfer, mainly since he lost his place to David Raya. Of course, he was Arsenal's number one at the start of the season. He's not anymore. Raya's taken over that place, and I think Arsenal fans are possibly still in two minds about that. Raya tends to make mistakes as well. But it's the fee that Arsenal are quoted as wanting for Aaron Ramsdale. 60 million quid. Now, quite frankly, like I said there in the headlines, Arsenal are having a laugh. There is no way that Aaron Ramsdale is worth £60 million. I'm sorry, he's just not. He's a decent goalkeeper, but he is prone to making mistakes. We know that, but he is a decent keeper. But Arsenal are wanting double what they paid for him just less than 2 years ago. I find that quite staggering, as to see how they can put that value at double what they bought him for when he's now not even in the starting 11. He's not the first choice goalkeeper. Where on earth do you pay £60 million for a goalkeeper that isn't first choice at the club he's at right now? It's absolutely staggering. And this is just greed, guys. This is just simple greed from Arsenal. And we've seen it with many of the cartel clubs in the Premier League. They think they can boss everybody else around and demand what they want, demand this, demand that. No. No. It's just not happening now. Newcastle United have apparently just rebuffed this with laughter. Now, I'm not sure, the report says that they've laughed it off, so I don't know whether they've made an inquiry about Ramsdale. They may well have done a couple of times already since, the Ramsdale rumours started about him coming to Newcastle or indeed leaving Arsenal. But 60 million quid is just greed. It's just pure greed. And you have no right, Arsenal, to ask double what you paid for this goalkeeper less than 2 years ago who has lost his place in the team. You just don't do that. But that's just a measure of where we're coming from. £60 million for Ramsdale for a second-choice goalkeeper when you could go into Europe and pay probably 3 times less than that to get a goalkeeper who is just as good, if not better, than Ramsdale. So what on earth are you doing, Arsenal? Think with your heads instead of your wallets, man. It's ridiculous. But there you go, guys. If you have enjoyed today's video, as usual, do give it the thumbs up. Very, very important for the channel. We keep those coming in. And, of course, if you like this and you're new to the channel and you've just discovered us, please do subscribe. It is free to do so. But don't forget to hit that notification bell, which will let you know when we go live or schedule our live shows or we upload any videos such as this one. If you're watching this on Monday, we've got a brilliant show for you tonight. It's the Toon Review rebuild of Newcastle United when the hosts... me, Alex, Sam and Billy try and rebuild Newcastle United over the summer with a transfer kitty. Who's in, who's out. Join us to see what we can do with certain money available or how we generate funds as well. It should be a cracking show. Then, of course, tomorrow night we've got the preview of the Palace game. And Wednesday night, 7:30, live here on the Toon Review. Matchday Live, Crystal Palace versus Newcastle United at Selhurst, but a commentary from, of course, me and Billy Bob. So plenty coming up this week on the Toon Review, so get yourself subscribed if you're not already, and have a great Monday, guys. Take care.